Dave, can you tell us like what kind of like big challenges you've had in your ministry, if you think throughout, the years you've been in ministry?
Well, I mean, one of the biggest challenges started at the very beginning, because when we planted the church, it was basically me, my brother John, and a few friends from college. So, I mean, the dream of starting a church that's actually going to try to impact a city like Chicago with just 5 people, I mean, it's an absurd challenge.
Right.
So that would, I mean, right off the bat, that was a big challenge. Along the way, there's also been challenges with trying to mobilize leaders. There's also been challenges, I'd say, financially. But in some ways, I think the gap between the vision and where you are, that is the challenge. And that's kind of what you do. And so you don't really see it as something that's going to stop you, but something you have to keep pushing on and persevering through. So,
Right. So why do you think we should be talking about revitalizing churches?
I know in the American context, if you take a look at churches, about 80% of all churches are churches that are either plateaued or in decline. And if you have 8 out of every 10 churches that are plateaued or decline, I mean, there's a huge, huge, huge need for revitalization. A lot of those churches really can, I think, be revived, come back to life, and give new life. I think a lot of those churches could become reproducing churches, and also could become multiplying churches even. And I think there's some of them, candidly too, that may need to face some of the brutal facts that, you know what, maybe the best option for them is to close and what we call a resurrection, let a brand new church come to life in that. So there's lots of options that come under that. But when you talk about that percentage of churches that need revitalization, it's a really, really important theme.
Okay. So now talking about young pastors or church planters, what kind of advice would you give them?
One of the most exciting things that's happening currently, and again, I'm speaking from my context, and we'll have to apply it to the Brazilian context. In North America, we just found out through some studies that we did that 83% of young pastors, so think about this, Tatiana, 83% of young pastors in growing churches now say a part of their vision for the future is to multiply. And they're talking about planting new sites and new churches. And so if I was to give young leaders advice, I would say grab a hold of that vision. Grab a hold of the vision of multiplying at every level. Leaders, artists, groups, teams, services, locations, churches, networks. I have just a strong conviction that the best way for anybody who has a leadership gift to really maximize and make the most of their gift is by multiplying at every level.
Okay. Well, now going back to your ministry,
Sure.
Do you have one biggest fear, maybe? A biggest concern?
For like as a local church,
As a pastor?
as a pastor, it's kind of I don't really often think like that. Probably one of my great fears is like running out of time. And the gap between, like we talked about at the beginning, I think the gap between the vision and where we are, that challenge, being able to actually make that happen. I mean, one of the things we dream about in Chicago, the city that I live in, is we want to start 200 churches there. We want to start one in every neighborhood and every suburb. Through New Thing Network, I'm leading the Church Plant Network. We want to plant 10,000 churches, 10,000 multiplying churches globally. We're making significant strides. We're at about 1,500 or 1,600 churches now, but there's still a long, long ways to go. So I think maybe the fear is there going to be enough time to actually get all this kind of done?
Right. Now when we talk about the real life of every pastor and church planter, what is the importance of family and marriage when we talk about a pastor's life?
I think one of the things that I try to really stress with young leaders is, well, 2 things come to mind. Let me change this from 1 to 2. One is something that my wife Sue and I have constantly said to each other, as we raise a family. One is, if you blow it at home, you've blown it. Now, that's not ultimately true because God can redeem anything, but I kind of want to live that way. And I think one of the advantages that church planters have, if they'll take advantage of it, is you can actually create a culture at your church that accommodates having a healthy family. One of the things that we did at Community, I never had regular meetings in the evening. So every evening I was home for dinner, and then afterwards I'd be, in the front yard playing basketball with the boys, or in the backyard playing catch, or doing something with Amy. I made it a practice to coach their teams all the way through. My daughter Amy and I, we'd have breakfast once a week from the time she was kindergarten all the way till she graduated in high school. There are no regrets about that. And I think one of the things that we have to remember is that if we're really building and growing and multiplying a church the way God meant for it to be, you're going to have a great family. He did not mean for us to grow a church at the sacrifice of our family. So, that's
the
what I
real
would
way
challenge.
includes your family.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
so
I think
that's
first
real
of all,
growth.
and the other thing too, I guess the second part, I said two things. The second thing is, as leaders, you will reproduce who you are. And if you want other fathers or other mothers, other parents to be great parents, to have great families, as a pastor, you're a leader, and you need to do that, because you're going to reproduce who you are.
Yeah, well, down here in Brazil, we do have like a considerate number of pastors that have been committing suicide. I don't know how it's up there, but would you have anything to say about it?
Well, I wasn't aware of that. That breaks my heart.
Yeah.
That breaks my heart. And there's probably, it's probably multifaceted. I think mental health is something that needs to be acknowledged, that is something that needs to be cared for and acknowledged. And that probably for a lot of us, we need to create safe places for pastors to be able to talk about their struggles. And there is no need to try to be the superhero. And I think if we created safe places to talk about our struggles, and we also felt like churches were safe places where we could address mental health issues, that would probably help immensely.
Well, can you tell us a little bit of how Exponential Conference started?
Sure. A little more than a decade ago, there was this little church planting conference that had been around for about 30 years, and they'd have 150 or 200 people that show up, and then after they get done, a bunch of guys would go out and they'd go like, who wants to be in charge next year? Nobody really wanted to be in charge. And actually my buddy Todd said, hey, I'll be in charge. And Todd's a brilliant mind. He's great with operations and making things work, a brilliant strategist, but not an upfront person. And so he got on the phone, he said, hey, I'm in charge of this church planting conference next year. How about if I run all the operations and you be the president, you be the upfront guy and all that? And I was like, sure, let's do it. And so we took it over, and that next year we had about 600 people. It just took off. And then the next year we had more than 1,000, and it's just continued to grow. And now we sell out every year in Orlando with more than 5,500 church leaders. And now we have 6 regionals in New York, DC, Houston, Chicago, LA, the Bay Area. We're going to be adding more regionals, and it looks like we could even be going to Europe in the near future.
Wow. Yeah, and what type of impact do you think this, Exponential has in the United States?
I think it's hard to know for sure, but one of the things I do think is I think we are getting to shape the conversation for a lot of young leaders. And I think one of the things that's happening is I think young leaders are starting to say, you know what, I don't want to just grow something big. What I would love to do is I'd like to grow a church that will continually multiply. And they're beginning to see that as they pattern their church after the church in Acts, which is Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, the ends of the earth, a multiplying church, as they pattern after that, actually they have the chance to be a part of a movement, and it actually advances the whole kingdom of God. And in addition to that, it also leverages their leadership to make the greatest impact possible. And I think more and more leaders now are buying into that, and I think Exponential has really led the conversation in challenging young leaders in that way.
Yeah. Well, recently we have been very blessed by Hero Maker. Yes. So what would you tell us? How can a Christian in his or her church be a real hero maker?
Yeah, I was thrilled that you were able to publish the book in Portuguese, and people have been really excited about it. I think one of the things for anybody who, particularly as a leader in a church, I mean a small group leader, or a kids ministry leader, or a student leader, any kind of a leader, in addition to a staff leader. I think they need to look at the life and leadership of Jesus. And one of the things we see about Jesus, like in John 14:12, he looks at his disciples and says, you're going to do the things that I've done. And then he says, and you're going to do even greater things than these. And in so doing, what Jesus was saying is, I'm going to make you the heroes of this movement.